Paris today, we know it as the city of love, of lights, of art, a place where the Eiffel Tower sparkles over cobbled streets, where hum with quiet chatter, and life seems soaked in beauty and romance. But in the spring of 1871, that same city was something entirely different. Paris was on fire not with passion, but with revolution. For 72 days, Paris wasn't ruled by kings or presidents. For 72 days, it was governed by the people themselves. For 72 days, Paris was communist, but not communist in the way the 20th century would later define it. Not a top-down dictatorship, not an ideology imposed by party elites. This was something else, messy, improvised, glorious. It was an uprising born in the streets, in the factories, in the hunger of ordinary men and women who dared to imagine a different kind of world. This was the Paris Commune. To understand how Paris reached this moment, we need to rewind a little to 1870. France was ruled by the Second Empire under Napoleon III, nephew of the famous Napoleon III. He had visions of glory, of reviving the grandeur of France. But in July 1870, he made a catastrophic mistake. He declared war on Prussia, the rising power of the German states led by Otto von Bismarck. It was a disaster. France was humiliated on the battlefield. The army was poorly prepared, badly led, and quickly overrun. Napoleon III himself was captured in the Battle of Sedan. His empire collapsed almost overnight. In the chaos, the Third Republic was declared in Paris, but the new republic was born in fear and desperation. As the Prussian army marched on Paris, the city prepared for a siege, and what a siege it was. For long months, the people of Paris were surrounded. There was no food, no heat. People ate whatever they could, rats, horses, even the animals in the zoo. Cold and starving, they held out. Finally, in January 1871, the government surrendered, but it wasn't the people who had given up, it was the politicians. And they didn't even stay in Paris, they moved the government to Versailles, the royal city just outside the capital. Too many Parisians, it was a betrayal. And worse, the government now wanted to disarm the city's National Guard, the citizen militia that had defended Paris during the siege. This was the final straw. On the morning of March 18, 1871, government troops were sent to seize the cannons stationed on Montmartre, paid for by public donations. But they didn't expect what happened next. Crowds of working-class women blocked the soldiers' path. They spoke to them, pleaded with them, and the soldiers refused to fire. They lowered their rifles. Some even joined the crowd. That day, 2 generals were captured and executed. The government panicked and fled. Suddenly, Paris was free. The people of Paris seized the moment. They held elections. They formed their own government, the Paris Commune. And for the first time in modern European history, a city was governed by its own citizens, workers, teachers, printers. It wasn't just a protest, it was an experiment. The Commune abolished conscription and the standing army, replacing it with the people's militia. Officials were elected and recalibrable. Their salaries were capped to match those of ordinary workers. Church and state were separated. Rent debts were cancelled. Workplaces abandoned by their owners were taken over by workers and run as cooperatives. There was no president, no parliament, just local councils, directed democracies. It was revolutionary, not only in politics, but in culture. Churches were converted into public halls. Education reforms were introduced to create secular, free, and compulsory schooling. Gender equality was debated and fought for. Women's clubs emerged across the city, organizing not only protests, but essential services like food distribution, healthcare, and defense. One of the most iconic figures of the Commune was Louise Michel, a schoolteacher, writer, and fearless revolutionary. She wore the red scarf of rebellion and carried a rifle in the barricades. She cared for the wounded and taught children during the day. For her, and many others, the Commune was more than a rebellion. It was the dream of a fairer, freer society made relievan if only for a brief moment. But the dream was fragile. The Commune controlled only Paris. Attempts to spread the revolution to other cities, Lyon, Marseille, Toulouse. The rest of France remained under the control of the government in Versailles, and Versailles was preparing to strike back. With Prussian permission, the government rebuilt its army. It weighed its strength, and then, in May 1871, it attacked. What followed was one of the most brutal episodes in French history. On May 20, government troops entered Paris. The Commune's defenders had expected an attack from the east, but the army entered from the west, catching them by surprise. The bloody week had begun. Barricades were thrown up in the narrow streets. Fighting was fierce. Women, men, children, many took up arms. House by house, the city resisted. Smoke filled the sky. Buildings burned. It wasn't just a military operation, it was vengeance. The repression was merciless. Communards were lined up and shot in courtyards, in alleys, against the walls of cemeteries. The wall of the Federated in La Chaise still stands today as a silent witness to one of the last stands of the Commune, where over 140 men and women were executed. In total, an estimated 20,000 to 30,000 people were killed in just 1 week. Tens of thousands more were arrested. Some were imprisoned for years. Others were exiled or deported to distant colonies like New Caledonia. The Commune had been crushed. Its leaders were dead or scattered. The red flags were torn down. The cannon fell silent, but something had changed. The Paris Commune, in just 72 days, had shown that an entirely different way of organizing society was possible. Not just theorized, not imagined but lived. Messy, flawed, imperfect and real. Karl Marx wrote about the Commune with admiration. He called it the political form, at last discovered, by which the working class could govern itself. For Marx, it was a model not of centralized power, but of grassroots democracy, a vision of freedom through collective responsibility. Lenin later studied the Commune as a blueprint and also a cautionary tale. He believed the communards had been too gentle, too democratic, that they had failed to strike hard enough or fast enough. The Russian Revolution of 1917, in many ways, claimed to learn from the Commune's mistakes, but others drew different lessons. For anarchists, the Commune was proof that people could self-organize without authoritarian control. For feminists, it was one of the first revolutions where women played an openly militant and public role. For artists and poets, it became a symbol of rebellion, of light and fire and sacrifice. And for the ruling classes across Europe, it was a nightmare. The thought that ordinary people could take power terrified them. In the years that followed, governments strengthened police forces, passed laws to control workers, and launched propaganda campaigns to portray the Commune as madness, chaos, evil. But the flame didn't go out. Decades later, during May 1968, Paris once again rose in protest. And on the walls of the Sorbonne, someone wrote, "La Commune n'est plus." The Commune is not dead. Even now, more than 150 years later, the story of the Paris Commune still burns. It lives in murals and songs, in books and battles, in every movement that dares to ask, what if we governed ourselves? What if justice meant more than law? What if freedom meant more than elections? The Commune wasn't just an episode, it was a mirror. It showed us what happens when the people take history into their own hands and what power is willing to do to stop them. It showed us that ordinary people, teachers, tailors, carpenters, poets can build something extraordinary. That revolution is not just a storm, but also a sunrise. That failure doesn't always mean defeat, because even in death, the Commune lived on. In songs, in red flags, in the courage to try again. Paris was communist for just 72 days. But it was enough to terrify an empire, enough to inspire generations, enough to remind us that history doesn't always belong to kings and generals. Sometimes it belongs to the people. If this story moved you, subscribe to the channel. We tell the stories that shook the world, the ones they don't always teach in school, the ones that demand to be remembered. And leave us a comment. Was the Paris Commune an act of courage or a tragic mistake? Could something like this ever happen again in our time? What would you do if your city rose up? Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.